and in contempt of Congress. Seen here on camera, you will see Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene approach her colleagues, Liz Cheney and Jamie Raskin. Greene reportedly shouting at them, calling Cheney a joke and asking Raskin, why don't you care about the American people? So what all happened there? Let's talk with Jamie Raskin, Congressman from Maryland. He is a member of the January 6th Select Committee. Sir, thank you for being with us this morning. What did happen?
Well, thank you for having me. I went up to congratulate Liz on really a splendid set of remarks that she made about Steve Bannon's contempt. He'd blown off our subpoena, and she made it clear that that's intolerable in a system of the rule of law. So anyway, I thought she had done a great job. I went over to congratulate her, and then Marjorie Taylor Greene, whom I don't know, I've never been properly introduced to, started yelling at me, saying, when are you going to do hearings about all the violence at Black Lives Matter protests? And I tried to engage her, as I do with all my colleagues. I said, we really should have some hearings about Kyle Rittenhouse and the two people that he killed at a Black Lives Matter protest and all the other right-wing saboteurs who went out to try to create violence and to commit violence against Black Lives Matter. So she turned her attention to Liz Cheney. I did hear her call her a joke and start screaming at her. I thought that Liz, who's about the best mannered and best poised person in the House of Representatives, might just walk away. But I was impressed that she gave as good as she got. And I'll leave it to Liz to talk about whatever it is she said. But it seemed to me like the theme of Marjorie Taylor Greene's comments was that Liz Cheney had betrayed Donald Trump and the Republican Party. And the theme of Liz's comments were that Marjorie Taylor Greene was, shall we say, a bit eccentric.
But Liz Cheney called her a joke, and she referenced the Jewish space laser conspiracy theory about wildfires. Is that correct? And Marjorie Taylor Greene responded to that?
It seemed like there was some history to the conversation that they were having. And it may have had to do with some of Marjorie Taylor Greene's postings online.
Okay.
But I couldn't hear all of it. I was sort of behind them, and, it kept going for a little while. But, look, the Marjorie Taylor Greene Freedom Caucus faction has been eroding the level of discourse that we have in the House of Representatives and the Congress. And it's very hard to know what to do, whether you just walk away or you engage with them. And I'll tell you, at least speaking on the Democratic side, that the post-Trump Democrats are very different from the pre-Trump Democrats. We have come as close to fascism as we want to come in America, and we're not putting up with any of the nonsense anymore.
Well, look, it was the comment section kind of playing out there on the House floor, indeed there. But I do want to ask you about the substance of what is happening with the committee's work. What happens if Merrick Garland takes a pass on prosecuting Steve Bannon on criminal contempt?
Well, look, we understand that we have a separation of powers. We respect the independence of law enforcement and the Department of Justice. Merrick Garland is a very effective lawyer, and he and his team and the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia are going to make their own decisions, and we're not going to try to push them, lobby them, sway them. We saw enough of that during the Trump administration. We're going to continue to use other tools that are in our tool belt here to try to get the testimony of everybody that we've subpoenaed. The vast majority of people that we've approached have come in voluntarily or have accepted a subpoena or in good faith negotiations right now about rendering their testimony. But we've shown them we're not fooling around. This is a responsibility everybody has, and we don't have a special class of people who happen to know Donald Trump who are somehow above the law.
Have Trump's attorneys been in touch with the committee about any concerns they may have about executive privilege?
They've sued us, as you know, but they've not tried to intervene in Steve Bannon's case specifically. And they've brought a suit against the committee, and that might be a great forum for us to deal with all of these different subpoenas that are in the air if anybody decides not to comply with them.
Okay, so that's a no. It's the lawsuit, right? So it's just the lawsuit. And then on the you mentioned many people are talking to the committee. Some key people, of course, are not. Mark Meadows, Dan Scavino. What is the latest on the committee's interactions with those folks?
Well, I think all that I'm authorized to say and all I really know is that although they haven't testified yet, their lawyers are involved in negotiations with our lawyers. I mean, here's the thing about a subpoena. If we tell you to come in Friday at 9 a.m. and that doesn't work for you because you've got a doctor's appointment and you can come in Wednesday at 4, well, we can work that out. That's one thing. But to do what Steve Bannon did, which is just to blow the whole thing off and to act with sneering, derisive contempt towards the whole process, puts you in contempt of the U.S. Congress and the people we represent.
Will the committee subpoena Jim Jordan?
As far as I know, there have been no discussions yet about any members of Congress. That obviously raises different kinds of issues. Now, Jim Jordan decided to come forward in the Rules Committee this week, and so he established himself as fair game for a whole bunch of questions. And he seems to have admitted in kind of a sideways way that he was in communication with Donald Trump on January the 6th. It seems pretty clear that he was in meetings prior to January 6th. And look, the bottom line is that we know that there are lots of people in the Republican Party, both elected and unelected, who know a lot of information about the assault on Congress on January 6th, which was the worst violent attack on the U.S. Capitol since the War of 1812, and perhaps the most dangerous assault on American democracy since the Civil War. One would think that they would understand that it's not just a legal duty, but it would be a civic honor for them to be able to render testimony. And most of the people we've reached out to, including their fellow insurrectionists, have come forward to testify and to give the information they've got. That is their legal duty.
President Biden said last night he made a mistake, saying that anyone who defies your subpoena should be prosecuted. But yeah, you can't. I mean, you can't unring that bell, though. And he said he's not going to call up Merrick Garland, tell him on the phone who to prosecute, who not to prosecute. But he doesn't need to. He already said it publicly.
Look, I don't think that Merrick Garland is afraid that Joe Biden is going to fire him, the kind of thing that Donald Trump got us into. I don't think he thinks that somehow there are going to be reprisals against him if he does this or if he does that. The bottom line is that the basic respect for independent law enforcement and the separation of powers has been restored in the country. We've turned over the information we have with the U.S. attorney, and we're going to let that process play out. But that's not the end of the story for us, because there are civil contempt procedures also for compelling compliance with an ignored subpoena. And we also have the inherent powers of contempt of the Congress. So, anybody who thinks that they're just going to get away with this and sweep it under the rug, they've got something else coming to them. I mean, their heroes, Donald Trump, who obviously travels with an army of lawyers and millions of dollars. But it's not going to be so easy to get away from our committee, because we are charged with trying to create a complete,
but back, I do want to pull this back, because I think it's really important to President Biden. Is it damaging that he said that?
I think on the scale of the encyclopedia of offenses against independent law enforcement in America that we saw during the Trump administration, that barely rates as a comma. I mean, it's just tiny. And I'm glad. And he apologized, something Donald Trump never did, for intervening to try to fire people, to try to intervene in particular cases, to try to get particular people prosecuted, like Michael Cohen, to try to get certain people freed. I mean, that was a whole different thing. And so he created some confusion out there. I'm sorry, Joe Biden stepped over the line. He pulled himself back. He apologized. I mean, we're back to normal business in America here. At least we're trying to get back to normal business. And I'm glad that Biden, had the maturity to apologize about that.
And on a happier note, pets. You have introduced, completely differently here, you've introduced a bill that has to do with pet shelters. What is this about?
Well, the pet shelters are overrun because of COVID-19 and the economic calamities we suffered over the last several years. And there are major shortages of food. And this simply says that just like businesses can give surplus food to human food shelters, they can also give now surplus pet food to pet shelters without exposing themselves to liability. So we're sort of waiving the liability rules to say we've got hundreds of millions of pounds of leftover pet food. Give it to the pet shelters that are being run by not-for-profits and by local governments around the country.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the constituency is for opposing that, but we will track that bill as well. Thank you so much, Congressman.